Do you have any idea how many possible chords there are? Yeah, neither do I. But it must be a lot. In fact, it's widely sort of agreed that trying to find out how many possible permutations of every single chord voicing is sort of like chasing down how many chess games could ever be played. It's a lot. It's a whole lot. So I have a question for you. How many do you know? 10, 20, 50, 100, 1,000? Does it matter how many you know? How important is that really? Welcome back to the channel. My name's Chris. Today you will learn the 5 levels of the chords that you need to know. Now, knowing a lot of chords is pretty cool. Maybe you could have a contest with your friend who knows the most chords, right? But the most important thing, really, is having the chord you need when you need it, right? You could know 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 different chords. And if you come across a piece of music with a chord you don't know, your library simply isn't big enough. But does that mean that you have to learn all bazillion chords? I don't think so. I don't think that's a good use of our time. But I do think there's a pretty simple standard set of chords that you do need to know. A set of chords that will get you through just about any situation you find yourself in. So I'm going to break down what I would consider to be a complete initial chord library, a complete set of chords, a holistic set of chords that you need to know to really function as a guitar player. And I'm going to split them into sections or chunks or levels, if you will. And those chunks are going to be in a learning order so that we can build on what we know as we go along. Now, you might already know some of these chords. You might know a lot of them, but I guarantee you there's going to be some surprises in here. We're going to start with the open chords, those cowboy chords, the chords that everybody pretty much learns first, the ones that are the basis for the cage system. From there, we're going to move on to power chords. Those are really cool. You might already know them, but I think there's going to be a couple surprises in there for you, even if you already do know them. Then we're going to move on to bar chords. Bar chords are where we get the first real versatile movable chord shapes. Those are seriously important. From there, we go to triads. Triads are probably the most formative chord study you can undertake, and we'll get to that in a second. And then finally, shell voicings, a way to take really sophisticated chords. We boil down those sophisticated sounds into just a 3-note chord that's super flexible and again can be moved anywhere on the neck. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. So let's stop talking about what we're going to do in there. Okay, first up are the open chords. For a large amount of us as guitar players, these are the first chords we learned. They're the catalog of chords you can play down here in these first 3 frets that utilize the open strings to complete the chord voicing. So the catalog is simply this: C, A, G, E, and D. Now these are also the underpinning of the cage system, which I'm not going to cover here. But these are the chords we learn first. They can get us through a lot of simple songs, but they're not very flexible. And for 2 reasons. One is we can't move them. If we start to move these shapes, the integrity of the distance between these notes to the open strings starts to fall apart. Right? And they're unusable outside of this position. The other way they're not very flexible is that I can only play 1 or 2, possibly 3 different types of chords from each one of these positions. As we'll see later in some of these other types, we get a lot more flexibility out of them. Let me show you what I mean. Here's our C chord. If we simply add our pinky to the 3rd fret of the G string, we have C7 now. So it's sort of a 2 for 1. We have C and C7. For that A chord, if we move this note on the B string down a half step, we have A minor. Or if we remove our ring finger here, the note that's on the G string, we have A7, slightly more flexible, right? Major, minor, and 7. For our G chord, we can take this top note, that's a root, that's another G, take it down a whole step, we have G7. So 2 for 1 there. On our E chord, we can remove this finger here. In other words, take that note on the G string down a half step, we have E minor. Or lift up our ring finger for E7. So for this one shape, we have 3 different types: major, minor, and 7. And finally, for our D chord, we move that top note down a half step, we have D minor. Or if we move that center note down a whole step, we have D7. So again, 3 for 1 there. Major, minor, and 7. So as you can see, even though we can't move them around, some of them are a little bit more flexible than others. Basically, they're stuck here, and we can only do so much with them. Next up is power chords. Power chords are 3-note structures played on adjacent strings in this shape, which is built using the root, the 5th, I'll explain that in a second, and another root. This is a G, for example. This is also a G. This 5, this note that's called the 5th, is simply the 5th note in the major scale. So if I start on G and play a major scale and number all the notes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's my 5th. 5, 6, 7, back to the G. So this chord is root, 5, root. Now it's called a power chord for this reason. It doesn't have the 3rd degree. We skip that here. 1, 2, 3. The 3rd degree tells us whether a chord is major or minor. I'll get into that here in a second. But these power chords are not major chords or minor chords. And that makes them a little more flexible. Now we can move them around without worrying about whether they're major or minor, so they stand in for just about any chord. The other really great thing about this is that since they are an integral shape on 3 strings, you can move them anywhere. Right, and the integrity of the shape stays put, right? That's why they're so flexible. And they're called power chords because they have this great sound, right? Without that 3rd, without that major or minor sound, just that powerful root 5 root construction, they sound really, really stable. Now the other cool thing about them is you can play them on other sets of 3 strings. So if I just go to the next set of 3 strings, right, I'm moving from this set to this set and put the same shape down, that's a power chord as well. This one's on C, A string, A, B, C. I can do the same thing here. Right, and they stay together. That stability of the shape sticks together. I can do it again on the D string. Here's my root, my 5th, but this B string is tuned down a half step. So instead of this shape, I have to push this note up to get the power chord to work. Same thing here. Right? I can do the same thing here on the G string, but now I have to move both of these notes up to accommodate for that B string and moving past it. Got the same thing here. Suddenly I've got this cool shape that I can play anywhere on the neck, real stable, real solid sounding. E string root, A string root, D string root, G string root. Bar chords are up next. This is where mobility and versatility start to really intertwine. We're going to be able to move these chords anywhere we want to, and we're going to be able to change each one of them from major to minor to 7th. So now we're really going to be building more of a holistic catalog. Bar chords are based on 2 of the open shapes, the E shape and the A shape. So if we take our E chord and refinger it like this, we can now move it up, place our index finger on the adjacent fret to sort of repair those relationships that we left behind when we moved it up. And now the whole shape's movable. And like an E chord, where I can make it major, minor, or 7th, I can now do that with my bar chord too. Major, minor, or 7th. So now I have major, minor, or 7th chords anywhere along this E string root, right? So if I see a song that has a B flat minor in it, E, F, G, A, B, B flat, put a minor chord down, right? Now I can build chords that I need when I see them, right? Very, very powerful stuff. The other bar chord is built off of the A open string shape. And as you can see, I've refingered that here. I can simply move it up and then again, place my index finger on the adjacent fret to repair those open string relationships. And now I can move this anywhere I want. Some people bar it like this. And like the A chord, where I can play major, minor, or seventh, I can now do that with this bar chord. Major, minor, or seventh. So if I see a song that has an F sharp 7 in it, on the A string I can go A, B, C, D, E, F, F sharp 7, right? These bar chords allow me to build any major, minor, or seventh chord I need anywhere on the neck in two different spots, either the root on the E string or the root on the A string. Another thing about bar chords that makes them extremely flexible is that you can change them into 4-part chords. These are chords that have the root, the third, the fifth, and the seventh of a scale. Now, all of that is a little bit theoretical, but let me show you how they work. I'm going to start with this A string root bar chord here on the 5th fret. This is a D chord. Just like the A chord, I can make it minor or I can make it 7th, right? I can also do this. Take this second root, this is another D note, take it down a half step, keep the other notes the same. I have a major 7 chord. This is D major 7. And again, totally movable. D major 7, E major 7, C major 7, right? If I take this note down a half step, I have our 7th chord, which we already know from the A7 shape, right? But if I take this note down a half step while I've got this note off, I have D minor 7. And if I move this note down a half step, I have D minor 7 flat 5. So with this one bar chord shape, I have major 7, dominant 7, minor 7, minor 7 flat 5. This is sort of a jazz chord catalog. I can do the same thing with this bar chord. If I just remove this 5th, in other words, I'm not going to play this, I'm going to play this note and these 3, right? So this is my new chord. If I take this note down a half step, I have a major 7 chord. Take it down a half step again, we have a dominant chord. You can play it like this. Take this note down a half step for minor 7, and then the note on the B string down a half step for minor 7 flat 5. So just from this one bar chord, I've got major 7, dominant 7, minor 7, minor 7 flat 5, all related to that one shape. Same thing with this A string shape. Major 7, dominant 7, minor 7, minor 7 flat 5. This is where bar chords become really powerful. Next up is triads. Triads are the smallest complete chord form. And what I mean by complete is they have the root of the chord, the 3rd note in the scale, and the 5th note in the scale. That's how we build chords. Root 3, 5. But they only have those 3 notes. So they're very, very small. They're extremely flexible because you can change them into anything you want. And they're so small that you can also map them all over the fretboard in a very, very large matrix. Much more so than any of the chords we've found so far. I'm going to use a C chord to show you what I'm talking about. Here's a C chord. C chords are built using the notes C, E, and G. This note is another C, and this note is another E. So really just C, E, and G. Now triads are just those 3 notes. In this example, C, E, and G. And since they're 3 notes, we can put them on sets of 3 strings. So what I'm going to do is take this C chord and I'm going to show you how to play triads on these sets of 3 strings. Here's our first set of 3 strings. C, E, and G occur on this set right here like this. C, E, and G on this set. And C, E, and G here. So right off the bat, we have 4 different C chords we can play. Those same chords on those same sets of strings invert in this position like so. That's a C chord, that's also C, E, and G. So now we have 8, and they invert one more time here. So now between the nut and the 12th fret, I have 12 C chords. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Right? That's pretty flexible. Now the cool thing about that is it's also movable. So I can do that same thing for G and just start on a different fret. These are the same shapes and these are all G chords. do them for A, same exact shapes. And the takeaway here is that for every single one of the 12 notes, right, all of the 12 notes, I can have 12 different versions of a major chord from that root. That's pretty flexible, right? Now, to go one step further, I can take any one of those 12 shapes, those 12 major chords, and turn it into a minor chord. Or I can turn it into a diminished chord. Or I can turn it into a sus4 chord, a sus2 chord. I can make it an augmented chord. This is where flexibility and mobility really skyrocket. Let me give you an example. I'm going to take this one triad. This is our A triad. This is one of those 12 shapes. There it is. I'm just going to take that one. And this is the root, the third, and the fifth, right? This is A, C sharp, and E, the only notes in an A chord. And watch what I can do with this. I can flat the third and make it minor. I can flat the third and the fifth and make it diminished. I can replace that third with the fourth and make it sus4. I can replace that third with the second and make it sus2. I can move the fifth up a half step and make it augmented. Just in that one place. Major, minor, diminished, sus4, sus2, augmented. Right? It's just about every A chord I could possibly play, and I have 12 places to make those changes. This is why triads are so formative. They're the smallest chord we can build, and yet they're the most flexible, both movement-wise, as well as being able to alter them into anything we need. The last type of chord on the list are shell chords. Shell chords, like power chords, are 3-note chords on adjacent strings, but these are not only movable, you can change them into multiple types. Shell chords use the root, the third, and the seventh of a scale. Let me show you what I mean by that. I'm starting on A, this is the root. If I play an A major scale, 1, 2, 3, I'm going to use that, 4, 5, 6, 7, and that's going to be my third note. That's an A major 7th chord. Notice it doesn't have a 5th in it, right? This just has the root, the third, and the 7th. If I take that chord and I take the 7th and I move it down a half step, that's a dominant 7th chord, A dominant 7th. If I take this note, which is the third, and I move it down a half step, I have A minor 7. So with this one shape, I have major 7, dominant 7th, or minor 7, right? I can do that exact same thing from this next set of strings. Here's D. If I just put a D major scale down, 1, 3, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 3, 7. Here's D major 7. Take that 7 down a half step. D dominant 7. Take that third down a half step. D minor 7. These chords come in really handy when you want to start investigating more sophisticated chord progressions, like jazz chord progressions, for example. Get some cool, sophisticated sounds using these small, easy to control voicings. Okay, well there it is. This chord vocabulary will not only get you through any jam session you ever go to, but it will also allow you to build any chord in any key, anywhere on the neck. That's pretty powerful stuff. Now, of course, there are other voicings. Drop 2 voicings, drop 3 voicings, really fancy, super stretchy voicings where we start to make a dent into that bazillion chords that are possible. But this method and these 5 types are a really solid, holistic start. Tabs for this lesson are on my Patreon page. That's linked in the description below. If you'd like to study directly with me, you can do that in the studio, my online guitar academy. That link is also available in the description, and there's a 7-day free trial. If you'd like to study with me, go ahead over there, take a look around. You've got nothing to lose for 7 days. If you do decide to study with me, look forward to meeting you. As always, I hope this lesson has been informative. I hope it's been instructional for you. Above everything else, stay curious, and I'll see you next time.